The book we'll begin today is an autobiography. That's an interesting word. It has two prefixes. Autobiography. Auto means self, bio means life, and graph means writing. So an autobiography is the story of your own life that you write yourself. Gary Paulsen organized his life story in an unusual way. Each chapter is about one of the many dogs he's owned. So really, the book is not just about him, but also about his dogs. It's a collection of dog biographies, but we'll learn a lot about the life of Gary Paulsen by reading them. We'll also find out how very different the personalities of dogs can be. After we read today, I'll ask you to write a diary entry as though you were Gary Paulsen. Be thinking about what you would write. Cookie, a dedication. Though I ran sled dogs for close to 10 years, did some 22,000 miles with them, this book is not about sled dogs or running them. They were truly wonderful, and I've written of them in other books. This book is about other dogs in my life and other times. I say this with some pride and not a little wonder, a dog person. I make no excuses for unabashedly loving them, all of them, even some that have bitten me. I have always had dogs and will have dogs until I die. I have rescued dozens of dogs from pounds, always have 5 or 6 of them around me, and cannot imagine living without dogs. They are wonderful and, I think, mandatory for decent human life. All that said, there are some dogs that are different, special in amazing ways. Josh is one, and you'll read about him later in this book. Cookie was another. Cookie was my lead dog when I first started to run dogs, and she was also my lead dog in my first Iditarod sled dog race. She took me from Anchorage to Nome, Alaska, when most people, including me, thought I couldn't do it. But she was more. She was a good friend, a kind of dog sister or dog mother to me, and while I have written much of her in other places, she belongs in this book too. Cookie was given to me by a man who thought she was so sick she couldn't run any longer. She merely had worms, and when I wormed her, she became a wonderful sled dog and then a wonderful lead dog. I did not set out to race dogs. I used them for work. I brought in wood with them, went to the laundromat in town with them. It was grand to tie the dogs up to the parking meter and watch people jump as they walked by, and trapped with them. In January of 1980, I was running a 75-mile line trapping beaver. I had previously trapped with a friend, but this year I was trapping alone. Not the wisest thing to do, since there's some risk from bad ice or injuries, and it's better to have a companion. I was alone when I made a mistake that nearly killed me. Why do you think the author did not take another person along for safety reasons when he went trapping for beaver? Please pause the video and think about that for a moment. The ice around beaver lodges is very dangerous. Beavers live in their lodges and come out of underwater tunnels to get food they have stored at the bottom of the river or pond through the summer in the form of branches stuck down in the mud. Each time they come out, they let air out of their noses, and it goes up to make bubbles under the surface of the ice, and this, along with the beavers rubbing their backs on the underside of the ice, keeps the ice very thin near the beaver lodge. It can be 50 below with 2-foot thick ice around the whole lake, and the ice near the lodge might be less than a 1/4 inch thick. I had parked the sled near a lodge and unpacked the gear needed to set a group of snares. Cookie was leading the work team of 5 dogs, and they knew the procedure completely by this time. As soon as I stopped the sled and began to unpack, they all lay down, curled their tails over their noses, and went to sleep. The process could take 2 or 3 hours, and they used the time to get rest. A rope tied the cargo to the sled. I threw the rope across the ice to get it out of the way. One end was still tied to the sled. I took a step on the ice near the rope and went through and down like a stone. You think there is time to react, that the ice will give way slowly and you'll be able to hang on to the edge, somehow able to struggle to safety. It's not that way at all. It's as if you were suddenly standing on air, the bottom drops out, and you go down. I was wearing heavy clothing and a parka. It gathered water like a sponge and took me down faster. Two things saved me. One, as I went down, my hand fell across the rope I had thrown across the ice, which was still tied to the sled. Two, as I dropped, I had time to yell, scream, and the last thing I saw as I went under was Cookie's head swinging up from sleeping and her eyes locked on mine as I went beneath the surface. The truth is, I shouldn't have lived. I have had several friends killed in just this manner, dropping through the ice while running dogs, and there wasn't much of a chance for me. The water was 10 or 12 feet deep. I saw all the bubbles from my clothing going up to the surface, and I tried to pull myself up on the rope. My hands slipped, and I thought in a wild mental scream of panic that this is how it would end. Then the rope tightened. There was a large noose knot at the end, and it tightened and started pulling up, and when the knot hit, I grabbed and held, and the dogs pulled me out of the hole and back up onto the ice. There was still very little time. I had a quart of white gas stove fuel on the sled for emergencies, and I threw it on a pine tree nearby and lit a match and set the whole tree on fire, and in the heat got my clothes off and crawled into a sleeping bag. I stood inside and held my clothes near the flame to dry them. I would have died if not for Cookie. She saw me drop, instantly analyzed the situation, got the team up. She must have jerked them to their feet, got them pulling, and they pulled me out. That was January 1980. It is now 1997 as I write this, and everything that has happened in the last 17 years, everything. Iditarod's published books, love, living, life, all of it, including this book, I owe to Cookie. This book is dedicated to her memory. Why do you think the author did not take another person along for safety reasons when he went trapping for beaver? Pause the video and think about this for a moment, please. What information do we learn about Cookie? What information do we learn about Gary Paulsen? Let's start a 2-column anchor chart. Each day we will add an entry about the dog we met and about Gary Paulsen's life. The dog's name in this chapter is Cookie, and she was the lead dog. A fact we learned about Mr. Paulsen's life is that he loves dogs and always has at least 5 or 6 of them. One of the words from our book today was analyze. What word? Analyze. Analyze means to logically break down a problem or situation. The police try to analyze the evidence at a crime scene. In this chapter, we read, she saw me drop, instantly analyzed the situation, got the team up, she must have jerked them to their feet, got them pulling, and they pulled me out. Analyze means to break down a problem using logic. Another word from our book today was unabashed. What word? Unabashed. Unabashed means without shame or embarrassment. Some people always say just what they think and are unabashed even if other people are surprised. When Gary Paulsen talks about his dogs, he says, I make no excuses for unabashedly loving them. Unabashed means without shame or embarrassment. For your written response today, you are going to write a diary entry. Pretend you are Gary Paulsen and write how you felt after being saved from drowning. Remember to write from Gary's point of view.